I remember the exact moment it happened. The charts were flashing like red warning signs, and I knew something big had just broken through. XRP had been quiet for weeks, silent accumulation, thin volume. But then, out of nowhere, the order books exploded. I was staring at the screen at 3 a.m., the kind of hour when the market whispers secrets that most people never hear. And that's when I noticed it. Massive sell walls appearing, not just a few million, but hundreds of millions moving across exchanges. Some entities had just sold everything for XRP, and they weren't small players. I checked the wallets. Known institutional addresses, some rumored to control billions in fiat liquidity, were liquidating their positions almost simultaneously. Retail investors were panicking, as expected. Social media lit up with fear and confusion. But the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't random. This was strategic, calculated, hidden in plain sight. The media, of course, was asleep at the wheel. Headlines screamed XRP drops, but they didn't mention the staggering accumulation signals I had been tracking for weeks. They didn't see the whales quietly offloading. They didn't see the signals in the cross-border payment flows, the subtle positioning in the derivatives markets, or the quiet approvals regulators had given behind closed doors. They didn't understand what was actually happening. I knew the story was bigger than a single price drop. Someone, or several someones, had anticipated this move months ago. And the question gnawed at me. Why sell everything now? What did they see coming that the rest of the market couldn't? The answer isn't simple, but it's going to change how you look at XRP forever. And just when I thought I had pieced it together, another movement hit the ledger, one so sudden and massive it left me frozen. The twist. This wasn't just about selling. It was about positioning for the next mega reversal. By the end of this video, you'll see what the market insiders already know. You'll understand why some people sold everything, and why others are quietly preparing to dominate the next wave. I noticed it first at 9:02 a.m. A regulatory update had quietly passed, something so subtle that most retail investors missed it. No flashy headlines, no breaking news alerts, just a small press release buried on a government website. It referenced XRP indirectly, mentioning new approvals for tokenized settlements and cross-border integrations. On paper, it seemed minor. But the order books screamed differently. Within minutes, massive bids disappeared, replaced by red candles flashing across the screen. The announcement was a signal, not the cause, but for anyone watching closely, it was the green light for a coordinated exit. I saw traders trying to react, but the moves were already in motion. Exchanges were struggling to keep up. This wasn't hype. This was execution. I traced one of the largest wallets moving at the time. Known only by its cold storage signature, it had accumulated billions over the past 6 months. Now, it was liquidating almost everything. I could see transactions spread across multiple exchanges, each one structured to avoid detection, yet leaving a breadcrumb trail for someone paying attention. I felt the tension rise as I watched these massive flows. Every move had consequences. Retail traders were unaware, entering at the top of the swing, completely blind to the strategy playing out behind the scenes. These whales weren't emotional, they were surgical. They had waited for the exact moment when the liquidity was thinnest, when panic could amplify their exit. And as I watched, I realized these wallets weren't just selling, they were setting the stage for a market reset. The price began to plummet. Within 10 minutes, XRP lost nearly 12% of its value. Red candles dominated the charts, but something strange caught my eye. Despite the panic selling, there were pockets of accumulation scattered across the exchanges. Someone was quietly buying every dip. The market looked chaotic on the surface, but underneath, a pattern was emerging. These were pre-positioned players, smart money anticipating the reaction of retail traders. Panic sells, triggered stops, cascading liquidations, they all played into the hands of those who had already prepared. I realized the crash wasn't just a dump, it was a signal, a coordinated squeeze designed to redistribute XRP from emotional traders to the hands of those who had predicted the narrative shift. The mainstream coverage was predictable. Fear-mongering headlines, screenshots of red candles, zero mention of the institutional maneuvering. I found myself scrolling through dozens of articles claiming a market crash, none acknowledging the deeper signals I was tracking. This is where the market psychology comes into play. Retail traders see red and they panic. They don't see liquidity pool emptiness or the silent accumulation on off-exchange wallets. Most news outlets aren't equipped to analyze blockchain flows or cross-border positioning. They report emotion, not strategy. Watching the coverage, I realized how blind the public is to the forces moving XRP behind the scenes. What the media won't say is that these moves are rarely random. Every crash has a blueprint, and in this case, that blueprint was meticulously designed by the smart money, exploiting both regulatory whispers and retail fear. Then I saw it. The movement in cross-border payments. XRP's ledger lit up with massive flows going from European banks to US liquidity hubs. These weren't retail transfers. They were massive institutional settlements, structured to take advantage of the volatility created by the dump. I realized the whales weren't just liquidating, they were positioning themselves to profit from the next wave. Every transaction told a story: hedge funds hedging, banks adjusting exposure, and liquidity providers moving capital in anticipation of regulatory clarity. The signals were subtle but unmistakable. The institutions knew something the average investor didn't, and if you weren't watching the ledger closely, you would have missed the signs entirely. After the dust settled, the market narrative changed overnight. Analysts now framed the drop as a market correction, ignoring the underlying whale orchestration. Social media buzzed with speculation, but no one connected the dots. I noticed how sentiment shifted in real time. Fear turned into cautious optimism. The same wallets that had sold everything were quietly building positions elsewhere, using the cash from the dump to acquire new exposure at discounted prices. It became clear this wasn't the end of a trend. It was the beginning of the next accumulation phase, where smart money silently consolidated assets while retail traders processed the shock. Every tweet, every headline, every breaking news alert was part of the fog designed to hide the real moves. The SEC chatter intensified behind the scenes. Rumors of enforcement actions, ETF delays, and internal memos leaked quietly to insiders. I could see how regulatory uncertainty amplified the panic, yet simultaneously provided cover for institutional players to make moves without scrutiny. Every red candle was a carefully orchestrated reaction to subtle policy signals. XRP, often misunderstood, was at the center of this tension. I realized the stakes weren't just financial, they were political. Regulators, smart money, and market makers were all dancing in a complex choreography that retail traders could barely comprehend. By the time the market absorbed the news, the whales had already executed their plays, leaving the rest of us reacting. Watching the flows in real time, I noticed a pattern. Smart money was consolidating across multiple exchanges, preparing for what I now call the second act. Red candles were a smokescreen. Empty liquidity pools and strategic stop triggers created an environment where retail traders unknowingly funded institutional positions. I saw wallet clustering, cross-exchange arbitrage, and off-chain settlements aligning perfectly. The smart money had already calculated the emotional response of millions, and they exploited it with precision. What struck me most was the timing. Every move was synchronized with regulatory whispers and public sentiment. The market wasn't chaotic, it was choreographed. Just when I thought the story was over, the ledger flashed another signal. A new layer of liquidity arriving from an unexpected corridor. The very whales who sold everything were now controlling multiple entry points into XRP, and the market was about to experience a rebound engineered by those same players. The twist is clear: selling everything wasn't capitulation. It was foresight. They saw the narrative shift, the regulatory timing, and the emotional panic, and they positioned themselves to dominate the next cycle. What most investors see as risk, they see as opportunity. This isn't luck, it's strategy, and it's happening right before our eyes. Here's the takeaway. The market is more sophisticated than most people realize. Red candles, panic selling, and headlines are distractions. If you want to survive and thrive, you need to understand the orchestration behind the scenes. Watch the ledgers, follow the institutional flows, anticipate narrative shifts before the media reports them. XRP isn't just a coin, it's a window into the smartest player's playbook, and the warning is simple: emotional trading will cost you. Calm observation, analysis, and understanding how smart money operates is your only defense. Those who grasp the patterns will be rewarded. Those who don't will continue reacting to red candles in the dead of night, never realizing the story was written long before the first panic sell.